Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building. The governor of Montana, Steve Bullock. Did I say that right, Nick?
You got it right. You got it right, MV.
He's also 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. So why the hell do you want to jump in this crazy-ass race?
Well, he's been in it.
I know, but,
it's only saving representative democracy at this point. I mean, it's sort of all the institutions that we count on are really being attacked right now.
Right.
And look, was the only one in this whole field of 37 candidates or whatever that won in a Trump state. We have to actually be able to win back places that we lost. I've been able to, even with the Republican legislature, get progressive things done, kicking dark money out of our elections, invest in education, doing so much more. So it really is, for me, it's what am I going to leave to my kids? And if I can contribute to that, I sure as heck better be doing it.
Now, how do you feel about Donald Trump and the impeachment of Donald Trump?
You know, until about 2 weeks ago, I was not for it. And largely because I turn around and say, I don't want to make the next year and a half all about him.
Right.
I want it actually about the voters who are saying, like, the economy's not working for them, D.C. isn't working for them. But it was the stuff with Ukraine where, and I was attorney general for as governor. When you look at, I don't know if it's the best political thing to do to impeach him, but I think anytime a president, like we vest the president in, he has one power or she has one power nobody else has, and that's actually to work with heads of state. And when he's using it for his purposes, not ours, you have to take action.
Yeah, and he has to be held accountable because I think it's just not the right thing to do is not to let somebody continue to get away with things because there's a lot of things that he's done that's been impeachable. And for some reason, this is the one that kind of put it over the edge. And to me, it's like there's been so many things before this. And don't we feel like in the government that we have, when somebody does something, they should be held accountable by the system of checks and balances that we are supposed to have?
Yeah, and Angela, I think that's right. All of the norms that we used to have, what we would expect out of a president, like then using the office to divide us by race, gender, geography, nationality, these lies. We do expect more out of our preschoolers than we do the President of the United States.
That is true.
Anybody else would have been fired from their job.
No, but yeah, exactly. But now, more than even that, when he's going to a head of state and saying, you know, another president saying, boy, I want you to take these actions.
I want to influence the election.
Yeah, for his own good. You know, saying you will talk to the attorney general and his personal lawyer, Giuliani. I mean, what is happening now? You know, if he takes money and starts building a wall, Congress can reverse that. You can't reverse the actions of a president, but completely that's vested in them as they deal with other heads of state.
Now, you said it might not be a great idea to impeach him. Why was that?
Because, you know, it's interesting before this. Like I'd say 70 trips, 70 meet and greets through Iowa. Folks talk about worrying about their hospital closing. They worry about their jobs. They worry about what happens if my car breaks down or how my kids' schools are. But their focus isn't each and every day on Washington, right? Their focus is on when 44% of Americans would have $400 in their pocket in case of emergency, if their car broke down or they had a medical emergency. Their focus are on the here and now, not what's happening in D.C.
But you could do both.
Well, and I think, we better be able to walk and chew gum at the same time now, right? I also do think, though, that the way that the House proceeds with this, the way that they go forward, matters because we got to recognize, like, somebody had said early on when I got into this, like, what's the greatest threat facing our country? And I think they were talking about foreign countries.
Right.
And I said ourselves, meaning that we are so divided right now as a nation. And no matter what, there's going to be 30% of this country that believes that this is all just a setup to get rid of Trump. So we've also got to turn around and say, how do we bridge these divides once this is over, either by the ballot box or by impeachment, to make people actually believe that we do share things in common. We can get things done.
So why would impeachment be bad? So why would impeachment be bad of the president?
Well, I think that the only challenge, and I think it has to go forward. The only challenge is in that let's say he's removed from office.
Right.
That there will be a good chunk of America that thinks this was all just a setup and a scam and he didn't do anything and that he was invalidly removed from the presidency. And we've got to turn around and say, you know, for that next generation, like, what are we going to have along the way where sort of people actually believe that government works and we can start rebuilding some of this trust and hope?
He wants to start his own network, he said, right? Is that something legally that he could do as president?
Well, I don't know if he probably couldn't as president, but once he's done, but he's never going to be competing with the Breakfast Club, right?
That's what we like to believe. Now, let's talk about Montana for a minute. What are some things that you've implemented in Montana that you could see on a larger scale being great for America?
Yeah, and I think everything from, like, we've kicked dark money out of our elections. You know, there's so much money. There was this case, Citizens United, that made corporations into people and money into speech. And if you even look since that case came down, about 2% of the spending before that was from groups that don't disclose their donors. Now it's over half of the outside spending. Like, we don't know who's trying to influence our elections.
Right.
We've kicked sort of the undisclosed money out of our elections. We preserved net neutrality, starting from Montana, then New York and New Jersey did the same things. Record investments in our education system. We've made it so it's not all about, like, we have the fourth lowest tuition and fees in the nation. But you got to realize, like, right, over 2/3 of people don't even go to college.
Right.
So we've made our 2-year colleges about apprenticeships, professionally recognized learning, so people can climb the ladder into a middle-class job.
Right.
And
not have that debt looming over them.
No, that's right. And I've done that with a 2/3 to 60% Republican legislature. So if, you know, the idea of being a progressive is actually making progress in people's lives, be it health care, education, or criminal justice reform. We've been able to do that there.
Are there things you've changed your mind on since you've started running? Because I know a lot of times it might be, you know, you get influenced by people who are working on your campaign. Because I always do look at who does this nominee have working on his campaign? Is it a diverse body of people, right? So are there things that you've been exposed to based on who's working on your campaign, or people that you've met that you thought one way prior to deciding to run and now you think differently?
Yeah, you hope you learn every single step of the way as you dig into issues. Like, you know, we put out recently a plan. How do we address economic development challenges in our communities of color? And I learn from the people that I'm surrounded by, my conversations that I have, and try to actually bring all that in to say, and I learn from other candidates, right? There are things that even other candidates have said that hopefully how this primary works out is the best ideas that could actually be attainable are the ones that kind of get sucked in and absorbed, and you bring it forward.
What plans are we putting into play, though? Because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, everybody's selling a car. Everybody's a car salesman, right? So they're going to tell you, yes, you know, we need help with health care. Yes, we're going to cut off the school loans. Yes, we're going to give everybody free health care. Yes, we're going to help, you know, with the schools and the education. But what plans do you have in play that says, I'm not just a car salesman, I'm going to deliver a good car that works?
Well, and I think look at where I've been to see, or any of us have been, to see where you're going to go forward. Because I think that's one of the challenges of Washington, D.C., right? It's become this place where you give a good speech and you say, well, I impacted people's lives.
You sell dreams.
Or you put out a plan and there's no way in heck that plan will ever get done.
Pass, right.
Like, I can turn around and say, I know that 10% of my population has health care because of the work that we did expanding Medicaid. I know that we made mental health and physical health parity, meaning that, you know, we're treating both wounds of the mind the same as wounds of the body. I know that we have the fourth lowest tuition and fees in the nation. I've never promised that I'll get rid of everybody's debt, because I do worry that we're in this time where when we're saying, okay, everything's free, folks don't want everything free. They just want a fair shot at that better life.
And where's that money coming from?
Yeah, no, that's, you know, look, you look in D.C., hasn't actually balanced a budget on time in over 20 years. If I didn't balance one budget, I'd be kicked out of office.
I always look at our finances as a country, and we're always lending money to other countries. I'm like, but we're in debt. I'd be like, where does all this money come from?
No, and what we're doing, right? Like, you look at the Trump tax cuts, where basically you got 60 Fortune 500 companies that paid zero in taxes last year. Whoever cleans this place paid more in taxes than companies like Amazon.
Right. I paid more.
And what that is that's actually, it's not a tax cut, it's a tax loan.
Right.
Because that next generation is going to have to pay the $1.6 trillion bar tab that they put up, because that money's not coming back in.
Now, you talked about helping minorities with real estate. What plans do you have in play to help minorities get loans and start owning their own communities?
Directly with real estate?
This is what everyone wanted to get into right now.
Or all across, right?
Like, as you say, a fair shot for all, economic inclusion.
Yeah, and it really is. Look, diversity is the strength of our country, but it also hasn't been, the opportunities haven't been, you know, equally distributed by any means. And that's not just a problem in 2019. It's a problem throughout our history. So I think that there are some things that the government can do as a participant in the marketplace, right? The notion that half our population is women, 40% are people of color, yet only 5% of all federal contracts go to women or minorities. We got a real problem right
Yes,
there
we do.
as well. And actually looking at where the preferences are and looking at where the basically prohibitions or inhibitions are to getting more of that contracting dollar. When we talk about federal infrastructure programs, where the federal government's building roads, what are we doing to make sure that those contracts are inclusive? We could do a lot more, but it's more than just what the federal government does as sort of a participant in the marketplace. It's access to capital and opportunities for communities of color. I mean, think of CDFIs, which are essentially, it's a federal program where you ought to be investing in a lot of the neighborhoods along the way. And I've said that I'm going to make Department of Treasury do a lot more to make actually those investments there for entrepreneurs of color. 2.4 million African-American business women in this nation. Well, what mentorship programs do we have along the way? How do we actually make sure that money is flowing into these communities? And the federal government has a critical role to play in that. How we choose to invest the dollars, how we even choose to have, you look at Small Business Administration, a young entrepreneur, black, white, Latinx, whoever it is, often would go in and say, help me with a business plan. But we don't even have locations for that or minority business development agencies in a lot of the communities where we need them.
You're right. We have it in New York. We have the Small Business Services, which I use all the time. And I did get my minority and women-owned business certification because I want to be able to, with my businesses, get some contracts locally. And so that is important. But I do feel like everybody doesn't have that in the communities where they need it, right? And a lot of people don't even know about it.
They don't know about it, and we don't even have made permanent like the Minority Business Development Association, right? Our agency. It's just by executive order. How is it that we can't have that there permanently? How is it that we're not actually making sure that the mentorship programs, because you could be an incredible leader if you had spare time for so many others.
Right. And that's why I do work with them now. So
do you really?
Yeah. I do.
That's great.
Whenever I can.
Because that's also that connection, right, is deeper than any connection that I could ever provide. Meaning that someone comes to you and says, I've walked your walk.
Right.
And
I know the struggles.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
Do you think Trump is a racist?
I do. I mean, I think that certainly he has used race to divide this country in ways that I couldn't imagine.
And he's not very fond of black people.
Well, and I mean, like
or Hispanic people.
Equivocating the thoughts of, find people on both sides in Charlottesville.
Right.
But I also don't think it's the labeling that's going to change things, right? And we got to recognize what we got to do is get rid of him for sure.
If you become president, how do you bring that unity back?
I think you begin by, part of this is really how one acts every day. Like I've always said, and my kids are now 13, 15, and 17. I've always said we need to act like our children are watching, right? I think you need to squarely call out his racist actions. But I think you have to move beyond that. And here's an example of what I mean. So think about when he was going after 4 members of Congress, right? And he sat there for 13 seconds in the rally.
4
saying,
women.
Yeah, send them back. Send them back. So we focused on that for 2.5 weeks.
Right.
Everybody's focused. At the same time that his Justice Department was trying to strip away insurance coverage and coverage for pre-existing conditions from everybody in this country. At the same time, Betsy DeVos was out there pitching her freedom scholarships, trying to privatize public education. So I think that we have to be firm with him, call out his misdeeds, but let's not make it all about him. Let's make it about the folks that are trying to, you look at when 60% of Americans haven't had a pay increase in real terms in 40 years.
Right.
Or guess I'm old now. I was growing up in the early 70s. At that time, 90% of 30-year-olds were doing better than their parents were. Today, it's only half.
Sheesh.
So folks are saying this economy ain't working for me.
At all.
They look to the political system. It seems captured by the money or captured by the special interests. So on the one hand, it's no surprise that folks were frustrated, anxious, angry And he said he'd drain the swamp. He said he'd have people's back. But what he did is, he's used that concern and that anger and that fear to really try to divide us as a nation.
And affordable housing is such a huge issue that we have right now because we're also not getting paid, not getting those raises, and we can't afford to live anywhere.
And I think, somebody once said to me back home, they said, homes are where jobs go to sleep at night, right? You can't really have a decent job if you don't have a roof over your head.
Right.
And I think as part of our overall plan, that's where we're looking at, because the federal government doesn't do it all, but it sends money down to the states and localities. And there's a My American Dream initiative. It's first-time home owners. It's lending assistance. Then you can take these community development block grants and say, let's invest in those areas. And that's everything from building a park to ensuring that you have the viability of a community so it won't be gentrified out as well.
What's your feeling on reparations?
My feeling on reparations is that I think that, look, the challenges that we're facing in 2019 didn't just start in 2019, right? It started with slavery. It started with desegregation. It carried on through redlining. And what we've got to recognize, to me, reparations is sort of healing the past, making right for wrongs in the past. And from my perspective, the best way to do that is to look at each one of these areas, criminal justice, housing, healthcare, and say, how do we make it? Yeah, education. So how do we make it so that the next generation isn't having the same discussion? I don't know that direct payments to folks will actually make a difference in making sure that our kids aren't having the same discussion. But I think we can go through, right? You're African American, you're 5x more likely to be incarcerated.
Correct.
Well, what do we have to do on criminal justice reform? If you're an African American woman, 4x more likely to die in childbirth. Well, let's actually look at those healthcare disparities. In education, if you're Latina, you are much less likely to graduate high school. And we know just on base income perspectives, the average house median family income of blacks about 60% of whites, Latinos 75%. So it really is how we heal what's wrong is say, here's where we are in 2019, and look at these disparities and take on each one of those along the way.
Now, how diverse is your campaign, meaning the people that work for you? Are you getting the feeling from every nationality? Are you speaking to people from
And
this
women.
community and women and Latino? And how diverse is your campaign?
About 25% of my staff are folks that identify themselves as people of color. I think over half of my staff is women. It's run by a female campaign manager. And I think that that's part of, the diversity and strength, because that's what adds to me is who I'm surrounded by, for sure.
Now,
What do you think about Bernie Sanders now? Because do you think it's going to affect him that he's been hospitalized? I see everybody talking about it now on social media. Of course, everybody's hoping for a speedy recovery. He does plan to be at the next debates on the 15th, but now it's calling into question, is he healthy enough?
Yeah, and I haven't seen sort of what's happening. He has to figure out, and boy, my thoughts are with him and his family all the way along. And he does have incredible energy, so hopefully he bounces right back of this. But this is also, and that's not, the voters will decide what we want going forward, for sure. But it is one where, we need to be sort of generationally looking forward as well. And I don't think voters will decide just based on age by any means, but they ought to. I think it is a fair question to say, who do we want represent us?
Right.
Which generation, which understanding do we want?
What do you think about some of the candidates? You mentioned Bernie Sanders. What do you think about Joe Biden?
I've gotten to know him, like his son, Bo, who passed away, and I served as Attorney General. He taught my son how to paddleboard.
Okay.
So I've known him for quite a long time. And, I graduated college in 1988, so 30 years ago. When I was a senior in college, I was like, this guy ought to be our president. Right? He was running at the time. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, boy, an experienced guy, smart guy, and it's just up to the voters at the end of the day. Do we want to be looking forward, or do we want to be grabbing somebody that's sort of been there for quite some time?
Right.
What do you say? What do you say?
I wouldn't
He
be.
said, vote for me.
So you're saying no.
I like Joe Biden, but hey, if he trips, he trips.
I like a whole lot of those folks, but I think I could do better job.
Kamala Harris, but
There
hey,
you
she
go.
falls, she falls.
You gotta believe.
I saw
Bernie
people
Sanders,
being
hey,
I saw people being upset about watching the debates and people going at each other, but I'm like, isn't that what a debate is supposed to be? Even if you're cool with somebody, outside of that, it is me disagreeing with you. It is me calling you out on things. But then we're also concerned because whoever is going to be the nominee, you don't want to make it so bad that everybody that supported you doesn't support that person.
I don't like the divide.
Yeah.
That's what happened with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders people did not go out for Hillary.
What's the balance there?
No, and I think one of the challenges, right, is these debates are that everybody's trying to have their moment. Mm-hmm. And their moment usually means you got to attack somebody else to get a little bit more pop on the internet.
Right.
So from my perspective, in the debates that I was in, it almost seemed like folks were attacking Barack Obama more than they were Donald Trump.
Right.
And we got a problem there. And it was funny. So there's a town, Ottumwa, Iowa, and this woman, she was a retiree. She was talking to me after the first debates, and she goes, missing from that stage was our voice, meaning that folks that are just trying to get by,
Right.
Talking about how government can actually make a difference for them at every step of the way. At times, I think these debates can become sort of a little bit.
It's all bullshit.
And it also gets
All
very,
surface
it does
stuff.
get very redundant too.
Redundant.
Because based on the questions that the moderators ask, they kind of ask the same.
Yeah, think about what we're really learning through
Right.
this
Nothing.
right now at this point. Yeah, no, and I think that's fair.
Right.
I think that's fair.
And
Now,
that's what we want to learn. We want to know who you are
Yeah.
as a person.
Yeah.
It's all great to say we're going to help with health care and we're going to go against big business, but what are we really going to do? That's what you're supposed to say. But like, how are you really going to change this world and this country? That's what I want to know from Steve Bullock.
Yeah. Well, I think I know that I can really change this country and this world by the way I've both led in the past and my upbringing. Every step of that. So raised a single-parent household, paycheck to paycheck. I only knew there's a governor's house in town because I delivered newspapers to it. So I've made it like 4 blocks in life, right? I went to some fancy private college, but sight unseen. Like the idea of college visits were beyond my family. Worked my way through college. I borrowed my way through law school. Paid off about $175,000 in today's terms.
That's a lot of money.
Oh, it's a lot of money of student debt. But still, I had that chance, right? I had that chance from going in a single-parent household, delivering newspapers, the governor's house, raising our 3 kids in it. So part of it is the background that anybody brings into this.
Right.
Part of it is the actions that they've taken. 25 to 30, like I was the only Democrat in the country to get reelected in a state where Trump won. A quarter of my voters voted for Donald Trump. And that's not because of the way that I acted. That's not because of the policy. It's because I'd actually show up and listen and even listen to people that I may not agree with to try to find some commonality. Because, the sort of the divisions and the need for unity in this country, I think is greater. We are more divided as a nation than ever before in my lifetime. And that's not just Twitter, and that's cable
In
television.
real life.
That's Thanksgiving dinners, right?
I want to ask you about a case that just happened, right, that we've been talking about a lot up here, and I've seen everyone discussing it, but the whole Botham Jean and Amber Geiger, the Dallas ex-cop who shot and killed a man in his own apartment. She said she was going into the wrong apartment, and she got sentenced to 10 years, and she'll have to serve 5 years before she's eligible for parole. What did you think about that sentence?
Well, I thought first it was... it should make everybody comfortable that they didn't even say manslaughter, which would be like an unintentional killing.
It's
They said it was murder. And I haven't seen sort of what the Texas juries typically, or what the juries typically award for murder. On the one hand, we should feel good that she was actually sentenced and will serve time. But it is a question whether or not she'll serve enough time. When you can even look at, and I think we're finally getting this awareness. You can have nonviolent drug offenses that are a heck of a lot longer than a 5-year sentence. For
Absolutely.
Sure. And if we need to be able to have trust in these communities and trust throughout the whole actually judicial system that you're not going to be treated differently because of the color of your skin.
And because you're a cop.
No, that's
because
right.
how often do cops actually get sentenced to anything, get convicted?
Yeah, and I think that's where I think the cup's half full, right? The cup's half full is that the jury didn't say, oh, well, this is a police officer, we're going to let her go. And then the question is, and I think it's a fair question,
We'll give her a
will
little
she serve
5-year
enough
slap
time?
on, yeah.
For sure.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing you for some more, and good luck with everything.
So you're not in the next round of debates, right?
I'm not in the next
Now,
round.
why is that?
Well, so
You have to qualify.
These DNC rules are basically you have to have the number of $1 donors are what put you up on the stage.
Right.
You got campaigns spending $50 and $60 on Facebook and Google ads to get that $1 donor. That's not what I've done. I only got in this in May because my legislature was still meeting. So I'm not on that next debate stage. We're about 4 months still from any voter expressing their preference.
Right.
So
I
think,
still don't know what I want to do.
and that's most folks don't.
And I've been paying attention and watching all the debates. I
Yeah.
went to the debates in Detroit. And, you know, it's hard to judge it just off the debate because, like you said, you have a limited amount of time to speak. Everybody's trying to get their moment, and people have their, you know, one thing that they want to say that's going to go viral, and all their interactions. It is really hard to judge from that. So I'm really trying to pay attention to people's consistency.
So I was in Detroit. Just
Mm-hmm.
imagine what would happen if you announced today that you're on Team Bullock.
Is that an announcement? Lee?
I'm saying I still don't know.
Okay, I'm just asking.
But this is our first time meeting, and
Yeah.
and we, I think, do have a different type of viewpoint because we do have an opportunity. We have met many of the
No, that's
nominees,
right.
so we can get a certain type of feeling. It's different when you see somebody on television and see what they say than it is when you see them in person, sit down and have a conversation, because I think a lot of what we are trying to decide is based off of not just what you say, but the feeling that you give
you
us.
are,
And do
sure.
I feel like he's an honest person? And
Well, and it's a great service that you put all these candidates on, too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because at the end of the day, we got to make sure that everybody feels like they can be part of government and part of the system. Not everybody's going to watch debates. Not everybody's going to do
Right.
this. So I
You're
think it's
right.
great.
The fact that you can actually talk to the people.
You bet.
some
most
people are like,
important.
I'm gonna just wait to see, you know, who's the nominee, and then I'll just worry about it then. Some people aren't even paying attention now.
Absolutely.
Well, how can
Absolutely.
people get in touch with you, Steve Bullock, if they want to support your campaign?
You can go right to stevebullock.com.
All right.
Yeah.
Steve Bullock, we appreciate you
And
for
you said
joining
you'll
us.
give everybody $40 if they donate $1, right?
I said,
No.
you will give everybody $40.
All right. It's The Breakfast Club. It's Steve Bullock.